Hello and welcome to the Monday evening.
Love ball like I do. After Dark's a must listen.
It's where I go to get my hoops fixed.
This is Field of 68 After Dark.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome in to the first Field of 68 After Dark of 2025. I'm Paul Fritschner, and this is the Field of 68 After Dark presented by BetMGM. That's Jeff Goodman. That's Mike LaTulip. Fellas, how was your New Year's Eve? How's everything going here as we get into the new year? Jeff, we'll start with you, and you're rocking the Mountaineers to get things going.
I mean, how can you not, right, Paul? I mean, guys, listen, I look for the hat to put on to feel good about myself, and right now nobody's feeling better than Darren DeVries and the West Virginia Mountaineers after beating Kansas and in Fog Allen. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but New Year was good. Went out here in Charleston. It was like 60 degrees last night, so I haven't had one of those in a while. Got a good New Year. What about you guys?
Fantastic, Mike. What'd you do? What'd you get into?
It's colder than 60 degrees. I'll tell you that much. I'm in Indianapolis, so it's been a mild winter to this point until really yesterday. So staying indoors, probably not roaming the city like Jeff Goodman here.
All right. Well, let's get into it here, fellas, because the last couple of days, lots gone on. Like you said, Jeff, we're going to talk all about West Virginia, shorthanded, travel troubles, everything else, getting to Kansas, but they get it done at Fog Allen. We'll talk about that as the show goes on, but some games here today, and we're going to start with North Carolina and Louisville. This is going to be a Big East heavy show, but we're not going to start off the top with the Big East. We'll get into them more here after this game, but UNC and Louisville, North Carolina goes to the Yum Center and Louisville wins 83-70. This game was, I think, a little bit closer than the final score, but Louisville had a 12-0 run there at the end of the game to really separate themselves, close the game strong. This is a very good win for a Louisville team and for Pat Kelsey here getting into the new year. And North Carolina, they don't have a bad loss. They just now have 6 losses that have all been kind of right there and just tough losses now on their resume. You can see the stats there on the screen, but Louisville, a 13-point win. Jeff, I'll start with you. What's a takeaway or two from this one for the Cardinals?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing for me for Louisville in this game was how important it is, because there just aren't a lot of big resume wins on the table. And not that Carolina's a big resume win. They're not. They're going to fight to get in the tournament as well. But they may fight with the Louisville Cardinals, and this game could be pivotal when the NCAA selection committee is looking at which team to take. I think, ACC probably you're looking at, 4 teams is probably the number you're looking at the end of the day, somewhere around there. And Chucky Hepburn was great in the second half especially. He's been pretty good all year on both ends of the court. But, I've said this. I think the difference maker for them is big James Scott, who they brought with them from Charleston. So I've had a chance to see him for a couple of years. 7-footer who completely can change the game defensively. Long, athletic, runs the court, blocks shots, and can be a lob threat. And they're trying to figure that out, because I don't think, Chucky Hepburn at Wisconsin was used to throwing those lobs like he can at James Scott. But James Scott was huge in the second half as well. Louisville pulled away. And I feel like, and we'll probably get into Carolina here a little bit, they're just too reliant right now on R.J. Davis and Ian Jackson. And R.J. Davis just doesn't have enough help right now. Ian Jackson can go get one, but it's still so much on R.J. Davis. And nothing's easy for him like it was last year when you could play a little bit of a two-man game with Armando Bacot. But huge win for Louisville. 9 wins, which already is more than last season's total. And the first year of the Kenny Payne era, they had a grand total of 4 victories.
Yeah, this was the first win for Louisville over Carolina since February of 2020. Kind of hard to believe when you look at it from that perspective, and you just look at just on paper, stone cold fact. It's been that long since Louisville has beaten Carolina. It's kind of wild to think about it. Mike, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, the stat you just gave, I think, is pretty indicative of the state of the Louisville program over the last 4 years or so. I mean, I love seeing competent Louisville basketball, and they've been shorthanded, but Pat Kelsey is doing what Pat Kelsey's done in every single one of his stops, and that's create a sense of belief, create energy in the program. And then you have guys like Chucky Hepburn, who I think are an extension of that on the court. And today, especially, I mean, Chucky, he always puts his imprint on the game defensively, right? And we'll get into that in a second. But, shooting 20 free throws today, the physicality that he plays with, and it wasn't a pretty game by any means for Louisville. I mean, they struggled to shoot from the free throw line outside of Rain Smith. They struggled to shoot from the outside, but they were able to scratch and claw and be ready to snatch that game when the time came in the last 4 minutes, which I thought was really impressive. And Jeff, you hit on a really good point with Louisville. Is this was granted a game on January 1st, but as far as March goes, these are two teams that could potentially be on the bubble. And when you start matching things up and looking at who played who and were their head-to-head matchups, this is a game where if you won it, you feel like if it comes down to these two teams in March, you want to be on the right side of that bubble with a win like this. So it's huge because there's not a ton of quad 1 opportunities. Granted, it's a quad 2 win for Louisville, but there's just, you look at North Carolina, this could have been a quad 1 win for them, but they squandered that. And we'll get into more of the North Carolina issues here in a second, but I'll let this thing breathe and kick it back to Jeff if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to me, again, like, Louisville probably shoots too many threes. They do. I mean, they're not a great three-point shooting team. And I thought the key was coming out of the second half, they decided, like, we're not going to just keep launching threes. We're going to take it to the basket. And especially against a Carolina team that, let's face it, they have no rim protection. None. We've talked about their lack of bigs and their lack of size, whether it's on the perimeter, whether it's down low. So I think that was the key to me, was Pat Kelsey going into the break and saying, hey, guys, you know what? We're not going to rely on the three nearly as much in the second half. And I thought they should have done that, honestly, from the outset of the game. When you're scouting North Carolina and you do have a guy like James Scott, who's 7 feet and can just go up and get it, throw it to him. I saw him last year, guys, catch 7 lobs in a game here in Charleston. 7. He was 7 for 7. Caught all 7.
All right, so let's talk. Well, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to hit on Carolina real quick because I talked about them a couple of weeks ago, and I felt like they play the game on the other team's terms. They're very reactive instead of being proactive. We saw at the beginning of this game, they lose Waterman twice, once by the rim, once off the ball. And look, there's no question that they're young in some spots. Right? You got Ian Jackson, you got Drake Powell, you got some of those young guys out there. But some of the defensive miscues from older guys are just, it's inexcusable. And one that I can give you, it's 73-69, big moment in the game, 2.5 minutes left. And RJ Davis has been in college basketball for a long time. And RJ Davis knows this. I know he knows this, that when you're guarding Rain Smith, when you're guarding a shooter and the shooter makes his way under the basket and into the paint, he is coming back out. And you have to stay attached. You have to have an arm bar on him, and you have to stay attached. He gets detached, falls asleep for a second. Rain Smith comes out to the wing, hits a 3, 76-69, and pretty much put the game away. And so there's definitely that. I know there's a lot of talk about the bigs, but the issues are deeper than that. Like I just think sometimes, like I'm watching that first half, and it's very casual with North Carolina. Sometimes, like I see some of the stuff with their guards. It's like a pickup game, and like it's open gym, and there's not that type of sense of urgency. And I will say, like, one thing that stuck out to me tonight was it's 59-51. Elliot Cadeau, and this isn't anything against Elliot Cadeau at all. This is just simply observing and analyzing. But Elliot Cadeau goes out with his fourth foul with 11:40 left. And what they do is they're just bigger and they're longer with him out of the game and not having those two small guards next to each other in the backcourt defensively, because you already have Trimble out. I can't talk about all this and not talk about Seth Trimble being out, because that's a big foundational piece of what you do defensively and what he brings to the table offensively. But they go from 59-51 down to 70-69 by the time Drake Powell fouls out with 4 minutes to go. And they cut into that because I just thought they made things difficult on Louisville, defensively. And so the last part that I'll mention too, because moving forward, you're going to have to find wins, right, in the ACC, and you're going to have to find a lot of them if you're North Carolina. And something that stuck out to me tonight, and it's not just tonight because he's been doing it for the last few games, Ian Jackson's a stud. Like that dude can play. And what stuck out to me the most tonight was with 11 minutes left when Cadeau went out, you know who Chucky Hepburn left? RJ Davis. You know he went to go guard? Ian Jackson for the rest of the game. So if that tells you the type of respect that a guy like Ian Jackson already has, is he's commanding that type of attention from the defense. Does that continue moving forward? Because if it does, that alleviates pressure on RJ Davis. It just does. Because you know who was dealing with RJ Davis, or was dealing with Chucky Hepburn the whole game before that? Was RJ Davis. So can that continue, right? The emergence of Ian Jackson, a guy that I think is a first-round pick, bona fide, like that's just gonna help. That's going to help RJ Davis. But I want to see what they do with that backcourt, because with Trimble out, you're just really small and you're really thin defensively.
So if you're looking at Louisville, let's do Louisville real quick, and then we'll talk more big picture on North Carolina. But I want to start with Louisville. A win in the non-conference in down there in the Bahamas over West Virginia, also had to win over Indiana. But now here over North Carolina as you get into ACC play. Is this a team, and Jeff, I'll start with you here. Is this a team that you feel like has positioned itself for a run to the NCAA tournament? Here, the metrics, mid-50s on KenPom, the wins are there, or could be there in the ACC, but the ACC not being as strong. Where do you think Louisville is now as you flip the calendar to 2025?
I think they're going to be a fringe tournament team. I kind of said that going into the year once I saw them a little bit. I think they don't have a dude. Like Chucky's really good, but he's still not a guy offensively that you just give the ball to and say, like, he's going to take over games. They got a lot of good players, and now they're thin. And Pat Kelsey is not used to playing 7, 8 guys. He's used to playing 10 at Charleston. I actually think that might work to his advantage, that he'll have to play 8 and shorten up his rotation a little bit. Because, again, I think I would have been giving James Scott 30 minutes from the get-go. I think his potential is that high. And he's something that other teams in the league don't really have. But again, I think they're probably, because their resume isn't that strong going into league play, and a win against Carolina at home, like Mike said, it's a quad 2 win. It doesn't do it. It's not like you look at it as you did last year as a resume win. There just aren't any others, unless you're going to beat Duke. There's no other win that you're going to get right now in the ACC that's going to completely move the needle. The best win might be like at Clemson. Well, Memphis beat Clemson. Like, that'd be a good win, but it's not one of those where it's going to move the needle. Like, there's probably 8 of them in the SEC that move the needle more than that.
Yeah. Mike, any big picture thoughts on Louisville here before we talk about North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I think Jeff makes a really good point about Chucky Hepburn, and I would have loved to see them have one more ball handler, like true guard, because that's who Chucky Hepburn has had his whole career. I mean, when he came in at Wisconsin, it was Johnny Davis, it was Brad Davison. They could kind of alleviate some of the burden that he would have as a ball handler and as an offensive player. And then even last year at Wisconsin, I mean, you got AJ Storer, you got Max Klesmit, you got John Blackwell. I mean, he's always played with other guards. Like, Chucky has never been a full-time point guard his whole career. Like, he has always been a combo, kind of timeshare type of guard in the backcourt. And so this is, I think, new for him. And I know he shoots 20 free throws tonight, but you're not going to get that every single night. Here's the thing with Louisville, right? Are they positioned to be in the tournament, like if the season ended today? again, probably on the bubble. The West Virginia win, when you got it at the time, maybe it wasn't what you thought it would be. It's definitely aged well. Indiana has not. But you have to, we look at the schedule. You got Clemson here at home on the 7th. You got, you've already played Duke. You don't play Duke again. So there aren't many opportunities. So they gotta really make hay with what they got on this schedule. But again, I would have loved to see this team with just another impact guard in the backcourt to alleviate some of that pressure on Hepburn.
And just real quick here, our last thought on this game before we move on. Jeff, North Carolina, 6 losses on the season. The first 5 losses were all very, very good losses from a metrics perspective. Where do you think the Tar Heels go from here?
Maybe the NIT or whatever that new tournament is, not the NIT anymore. And if they do, I think, listen, there's a bigger picture conversation to have here. And it is the future of North Carolina basketball and whether Hubert Davis is a part of it. I know people maybe don't want to have that conversation yet, but I think it may be time here because I don't see them other than, yes, Ian Jackson is special talent-wise, okay? But he is a freshman. And he can look phenomenal 1 minute and then look like he has no clue what he's doing the next. And I think that's the problem with relying on Ian Jackson this year. You're going to be up and down. He'll help out RJ because he will take some pressure off him. And again, he might take the best defender on him because he's bigger, he's more explosive. He can really get a shot off whenever he wants. But I just don't know if you can rely on a guy like that this year to carry you to the NCAA tournament. I think he's going to have a little bit of like Caleb Love in him just because he's a freshman. And again, I just don't think he knows yet what a good shot is from a bad one. But with regards to Hubert Davis, this is a guy that his first year, he made the title game. But until that final month, they weren't really a tournament team. They're a fringe tournament team. Then year 2, they're terrible. They're terrible. They underachieve. They don't make the NCAA tournament. They finish 11-9 in the league, 7th in the conference. And then last year, they bring in a couple transfers, and they're terrific. Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram. And they were absolutely phenomenal last season. And now it's like they're back to kind of maybe being a tournament team again. Is that good enough, Mike, for North Carolina basketball? I say no way in hell.
No, it's not good enough. And I think you got to find solutions fast if you're Hubert Davis. They talked on the broadcast today where he's like, hey, RJ Davis, Baycott's not down there to get doubled. So it's kind of hard on him. It's like, as a coach, you got to figure that out, man. You got to figure out like, hey, if bigs are what we lack, then maybe it's not the best to continue to do high ball screen after high ball screen because none of those bigs rolling to the rim are going to have any gravity to pull in defenders. All right. And then you're just going to make it harder on your wings. So I think they got to get more creative offensively and not just say, RJ, go get us one. Elliot, go get us one. Ian, go get us one. Like that becomes very, very easy to guard. Very easy to guard. Now they're at their best when they're in transition, but they got to guard as well. They got to finish possessions. That's part of the reason why they lost the game to Louisville tonight was they couldn't finish possessions. Louisville gets 4 offensive rebounds in the last 3 minutes of the game, and it's over. So they need to find solutions fast. And you talked about, a couple of years ago, yes, they go to a title game, and then your preseason number 1 the following year, which I thought was fluky to begin with. And I was like, you can't just go based off of a 3-week tournament run, be like, hey, wait, this 8-9 seed who returns some guys from an 8-9 seed, they're our number 1 team in the country. That was ass backwards to begin with. But look, like, was that probably unfair expectations that year? Yes, but it's still North Carolina, like you're saying, Jeff. It's still North Carolina. And so that brand, I think the brand, the NIL has been funky, right? Because there's certain brands that I think have taken a hit and haven't been probably what they've been historically. But you got to get that back if you're North Carolina, because you still have a really good foundation of what you've built over the years, and it's on Hubert Davis to continue that.
All right, let's move on to Connecticut and DePaul. UConn wins today in Chicago, 81-68. The big story from this game as far as injury news goes is Liam McNeely went down, kind of twisted his ankle a little bit in that game. Dan Hurley said after the game that he is I think he said unlikely was the word he used to play in the Providence game this upcoming weekend, but it didn't sound like they feared it was too serious in the long term. But UConn was up by a lot for most of this game. Then it got narrowed down to 13 there at the end. Jeff, any concern there? Did you hear anything more about Liam McNeely? Is there anything here for UConn going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think from what I heard it's overly serious, but as you mentioned, I think he could miss a couple games here. And he's huge for them. I mean, he's huge. He's been arguably their best player overall. Caravan was hurt for a couple games, but McNeely has not played like a freshman at all. He does everything. He shoots it. He moves the ball. Defensively, he's still got a little ways to go, but Lee McNeely's been one of the best freshmen in the country, maybe one of the better players in the country. So on one hand, they can ill afford to lose him. But as long as it's only for a week or two, it's not that big a deal. I mean, listen, what UConn's done since getting back from Maui, winning 7 straight, and kind of how they've done it has been impressive. And I think they've developed a few other guys here, right? Like we saw today, Aiden Mahaney actually helped the team, right? I mean, he's been a non-factor in most of these games. He was pretty good against DePaul today. And I think they need another guard. And DR has been way better than I thought he'd be. Like, I thought he could be a liability as a starting point guard for this team going into the season. I thought he was the X factor, the guy that I kind of doubted more than anybody else. And he's been absolutely terrific. And I think part of that, though, is he does have a couple guys playing alongside him in McNeely and Caravan that know how to move the ball, that know how to make good decisions. And they alleviate a lot of that pressure of having to be the primary or only ball handler.
Mike, how about Solo Ball today? 7 for 9 from 3. I mean, by far the most threes he'd made so far this season. He made 4 in a couple of games, but just a phenomenal day for Solo Ball on the perimeter.
He was out of his damn mind. Just flat out. I mean, he's been one of the best shooters in college basketball. And that's crazy to think that on a team with Caravan, on a team with McNeely, some of these guys that are elite shooters, Solo Ball has probably been the best of all of them. And so what that does for your offense, for an offense that already is predicated on ball movement and player movement, the paranoia that he's going to create as you get further into Big East play with a lot of these teams scouting him, that's huge. And Jeff, you touched on Diarra. I mean, that's a guy that watching over the years, it was because of the talent in front of him. It's come in, don't make a mistake, knock down open shots, create if you absolutely have to. And then now you just see what happens with players when they get the keys, when they get the confidence, how it unlocks a lot. And it has for him. And it's the playmaking is one thing. I mean, 9 assists, 1 turnover today, but just the ball security, the focus. I mean, he is. I didn't expect this. I really thought in Maui when Mahaney kind of went off the rails, I was like, I don't know if DR is ready to step up and do this, and he's done that and some. So that UConn just continues to show, especially offensively. I mean, they're right up there with anybody in the country on that end, just because of the problems that they pose and the bind that they put you in as a defense. But yeah, McNeely being out, you saw in that DePaul game when McNeely was out and when DR was out, it gets dire for some stretches there because those are two of their main creators. So I want to see how that unfolds over the next few weeks. But the good thing for McNeely is, when you look at the schedule, it's Providence, Villanova, it's Georgetown, which, this year it's, I don't want to say not your father's Georgetown, probably like not your older brother's Georgetown, just because, they obviously Georgetown has a pretty storied history. But so that's not going to necessarily be like a rollover type of game. And then, you get Creighton at home. So those are 4 games that are winnable if McNeely has to be out. And then if he is out and it's extended, who steps up, right? Jaden Ross is a guy that I'm looking at, especially on the defensive end, has to step up, has to gain confidence in that role. Because look, with UConn, it's unlike a lot of programs in the country where when you're a bench guy that has to step into a bigger role, it can be a lot because of the actions and the movement and what's expected of you, especially on the offensive end. So those guys will continue to get, I think, a feel for that. But the last point that I'll mention is I think Dan Hurley talked about it today with the guys on the broadcast is, hey, last year's team, they had a killer instinct and they put teams away. We got up by 13 and that thing went to 30. And you've seen a couple times this year with UConn, they get up 20 or they get up 18, teams creep back into it. That's something as the year goes on.
They miss Cam Spencer a ton for that as much as anything. Like, I just feel like the rest of the team kind of look to him for some. I mean, you see it, him going in the NBA, going right after Devin Booker last night, right? Like, he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, no, and I think that's something that can be developed for a team. But I think like McNeely I think as a freshman, he is like their emotional leader. And so that's something I'm looking at closely over these next few games. But yeah, I mean, you develop that as the year goes on, and you hope that they got the talent to get up on teams and put teams away and cut off their air. So I'm not worried with UConn at all.
All right, one more in the Big East here today, fellas, before we take our first break. Villanova and Butler. This game flipped on its head real quick. It was 64-51 Butler with 5 minutes to go in the game. And then Villanova rips off a 22-1 run to end the game. And Hinkle Fieldhouse has been a house of horrors for Villanova over the years. I think Butler had won 4 of the last 5 over Villanova at Hinkle. Just in recent years, it's been a tough place for Villanova to win at. It's a tough place for anybody to win at, but especially for Villanova here over these last few years. And it looked like it was trending that way into the final few minutes of the game. Eric Dixon goes for 28. And when you watch some of the moves, for the size that Eric Dixon has, when you watch him play, the nimbleness that he has around the perimeter to be able to navigate some of those tough angles, get shots off, and not only get the shots off, but make it look like a high quality look and finish with 28 on 10 of 20 from the floor. I mean, a really special day in a season of them for Villanova. And I mean, is it crazy to say that after everything that we've talked about with Villanova and their issues and how bad they've looked at different points over the last 3 years, they are very quietly, and maybe not so quietly anymore, starting to really put things together here?
Paul, I didn't know just because we had you on as a host today that we're going to be able to talk NIT teams, Big East NIT matchup between Villanova and Butler. Like, I don't know how you got this done. I have no idea how you got it done, but you did, and I commend you for it. And Eric Dixon has been sensational this year, but nobody's really noticed. Why? Because Villanova hasn't been good enough. And Butler's kind of come down to earth a little bit as well. Listen, both these guys, they're middle of the road teams right now in the Big East, and there's a lot of those right now. And we may have a bigger Big East conversation coming up, but it just seems like a 3-team right now today, a 3-team league that we're really talking about, right? I mean, it's Marquette, UConn, and St. John's, and then it's kind of everybody else. And all these teams are going to beat up on each other. Somebody's going to have to finish 4th. I think it'll be Creighton, just because they beat St. John's at home. Big home court advantage. They still have the best defensive player in the league in Kalkbrenner, and they still have one of the better offensive players in Stephen Ashworth, veterans. So I think they finished 4th, but it's kind of right now, like, I don't know, Villanova, I guess, could finish 4th. I don't think Butler does. This was certainly a blow to Butler, who now, by the way, they're 0-3 in the league, and they got to go Marquette, UConn, St. John's and Providence next, the next 2. They've lost to Marquette, UConn, Villanova. They now get, I think, St. John's and Providence both on the road next. So they're in trouble. Villanova, listen, Kyle Neptune's trying to save his job. I think probably the way to do it now is just find a way to finish 4th in the league and be on the bubble for the NCAA tournament.
Mike, your take on the Villanova Wildcats after that comeback win today at Hinkle?
I mean, I think you got to credit them. With 6 minutes left, down 13. That's some resolve to keep fighting, to pull that one out on the road. So I definitely want to start there. But look, this is just kind of the nature of it. When you look at a team like Villanova, where you start off the year and you beat Lafayette, but then you lose to Columbia, you lose to St. Joe's. Like, teams are just going to look the other way for a long time. They're going to write you off. My first show on here was after that Columbia loss, and we're talking about Kyle Neptune being on the hot seat. So they've definitely quietly, with the win over Cincinnati, obviously the win over Butler tonight, they're quietly trending in the right direction, but they're not going to really wake anybody up until they knock off one of the big dogs in the Big East. And then they got a chance over the next couple weeks. They get UConn at home, and then they go on the road to St. John's. And look, you win one of those two games, I think people are going to start looking in your direction. And again, this is the theme tonight has been programs with a really storied tradition kind of floundering. And so can Kyle Neptune, get two hands on the wheel and continue to steer this thing in the right direction? Because it is I think it's a 2-team league, to be honest, in the Big East. Like I'm not there with St. John's to put them in as third. Honestly, I might put Xavier over St. John's. We'll get into that, but yeah, I mean, Villanova's still got work to do, but I can't discredit the comeback tonight and the win because it's just league play. It's tough to win on the road.
Eric Dixon's had such a phenomenal year for them that I'm wondering, and it may not happen. It may not happen where he has an off night just because he's had so many good nights this year, because just by force, his usage rate, everything else, it's going to have to be high because that's the way they're going to win games. But on a night where maybe he doesn't have the night that they need him to have, who is that guy for Villanova? Where do they go after Eric Dixon? And that's what really concerns me if I'm a Villanova fan is, and it's obvious watching them every night in and night out, it's just that depth beyond your best player. What do you have? Who can you count on there to really get that scoring? But all right, fellas, let's take a break. When we come back, some more talk on the Big East and everything else. We'll talk more about the rest of the country as we get on in this show. You're watching the Field of 68 After Dark.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against-the-spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description.
Back here on the Field of 68 After Dark, Paul Fritschner, Jeff Goodman, Mike LaTulip, ringing in 2025 here on the first show of the new year. Great to be with you guys. And let's keep this conversation about the Big East moving, because there were 3 games from yesterday that we need to talk about. And the first one, I think maybe the most important one as far as storylines go for us to talk about here, is Marquette and Providence. And it was a 28-point game. Marquette steamrolled Providence at the Amp 78-50 in a game that was never close. But for a 28-point win, I think there's a lot of nuance to this game. There's a lot of things that we can talk about on both sides. So I want to ask Mike, I want to ask you this to start off the discussion. Does this win for Marquette, does this game in general say more about Marquette, or does it say more about Providence and where these teams are right now?
I mean, I think it says more about Marquette, to be honest. I mean, I'm not sure there's a team in the country in college basketball that breaks your spirit as fast as Marquette can break your spirit. Okay, like they just, I mean, Providence hops out to an 8-2 lead. The dunk is energized, and then you look up and it's 28-10, and it's a 26-2 run from Marquette, and you're like, what the hell just happened? And so, this is a collection of dudes that They're always focused. They're always tough. They're always physical, and they don't allow you to exhale. They just don't. And you have to play a full 40-minute game against Marquette, and Providence didn't do that. And in about a 5-minute span, that game was done. And so that's people talk about with Marquette, they're like, well, the turnover margin. It's like, well, they don't turn it over and they turn you over, and that sounds simple, but to me that tells me all I need to know about your mental makeup as a team. And offensively, you are intelligent, you have an identity, you take care of possessions. Defensively, you're physical, you're active, you're consistent on that end. That's all mental makeup, and that starts from the top with Shaka Smart, and it trickles down to the rest of those dudes on that team that just bring it every single night. Because those intangibles, beyond just what we talk about with like how talented Cam Jones is, and how they get into you and turn you over, those are intangibles you can bring to the table every single night in conference play in the NCAA tournament. And that's why this is a team that's going to make a deep run, in my opinion, because they have the ability to just end games in the blink of an eye. And Providence was on the receiving end of that. And they just completely take you out of what you want to do. And they just, like, gaps evaporate, passing lanes evaporate, and you just start settling. They just make you settle, and they just break your will. And that's what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, they have
we
a
talked.
They have a culture.
Well,
that's what they have, and Providence doesn't have that yet. Now, Providence had a star a year ago that kind of hid some of their issues, right? In Devin Carter, they don't have that anymore. They don't have that guy. They don't have the talent. They don't have the culture. They got a bunch of new guys. They're trying to figure out their roles. Where Marquette already knows their roles. Every guy on that team, for the most part, knows, understands, and from the outside embraces their role, Paul. That's the key.
Well, and I think you make a good point. And that was what I was going to say. Was we talked so much before the season about this Marquette team and how Shaka Smart didn't pick up any players in the portal and he didn't lose any players to the portal. And that was going to be the method to his madness this year, that they were going to roll with their guys. And I thought it was going to be a very interesting case study for coaches across the country to say, all right, what happens with Marquette? Is this a team that's going to fall off after competing as well as they did last year, making the second weekend of the NCAA tournament? Did they need help in the portal? Could they have gone and gotten it? Could they have gone and picked up somebody that maybe would have complemented this roster? Or is this a team that is going to challenge to win the Big East and get a protected seed in the tournament? And right now, there's a top 10 team on KenPom. This is a team that looks like it's positioned for a run at a number one seed in the NCAA tournament, and it is positioned for a run to win the Big East. This is a really, really good Marquette team that absolutely laid the hammer on Providence yesterday in Rhode Island.
And Cam Jones, it starts there, man. Like, if they didn't have a dude like him, all those other guys would be exposed a little bit, because I don't know they have another dude like that. But all those other guys understand, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to eat a little bit more this year. But Cam Jones is the guy. Kolek and Cam were kind of the guys last year, and Kolek was probably, Batman, and Cam was Robin. Well, now there's Batman, and I'm not even sure there's a Robin on this team. But everybody else got a little bit better. But again, I think that's the beauty of this is Shaka Smart didn't have to start from ground zero. Like, all these guys knew the culture, they knew the system. They know to play hard, or else they're not going to stay on the court defensively. They've got, elite defenders. And even your best player, Cam Jones, is a really, really good defender. Yeah.
It's just one after another when you talk about this Marquette team. And they don't have a ton of size. They have size, but it's not a ton of size. But I think the physicality that they bring is what sticks out to me. Whether it's Stevie Mitchell diving on the floor, being physical, being tough. It's those little things that Shaka Smart has instilled in this team that you might say sound cheesy. You might say, Paul, that sounds like some cornball answer, but it's not. It's really what makes this Marquette team spin, and it's why they consistently win night in and night out.
We talk
when
about
are we going to get to your
too.
Xavier? When are we going to get to your Xavier Musketeers? I know you've been waiting for this all show to talk about Your Xavier Musketeers and a huge win over John Fanna's Seton Hall team. And now everybody beats Seton Hall. Let's be honest. Everybody beats them right now. So you shouldn't have your chest pumped out after that win, Paul. Settle down.
Yeah,
right?
Well, here's Xavier and Seton Hall for you. It's Xavier, you don't have Zach Freemantle, right? You're trying to figure out what you are here with Zach Freemantle for as long as Zach is going to be out, whether that's short term. Sean Miller talked after the game about potentially getting Zach back here relatively soon. Initially, it was kind of feared that he was going to be out potentially. Was it going to be the rest of the season? Nobody knew. And then now all of a sudden, can you get Freemantle back here in the next, few, who knows? I don't want to put any timetable. I would say much sooner than, the end of the season. And so now here you are, if you're Xavier, where you were right there at the end against Cincinnati. You were right there at the end against Connecticut. You were right there at the end against Marquette. And none of them turned into wins. So you don't really have that resume win. You have a win over South Carolina and Florida. You have a win against Wake Forest that was good but hasn't aged great. But you, as a team, there are no moral victories, but you've been right there, even without Freemantle, against UConn in overtime and Marquette. And if I'm Xavier now looking at this, you have a chance at Georgetown on Friday night. Then you go back home against St. John's with a potential to pick up a really nice win, especially by metrics. And then DePaul and Villanova. This is a really winnable 5-game stretch for Xavier, where if you turn 5 wins out before you get to the end of January, where you have this gauntlet at the end of January of Marquette, St. John's, UConn, and Creighton in 4 straight games, that if you can pick up a win or two in that, I'm not saying that all of a sudden the season is completely turned around, but you go 4-1 or 5-0 in this 5-game stretch here, and then you reel off a couple of wins there. You're talking about a team that's right there back on the bubble and challenging for an NCAA tournament bid.
Nobody would want to play them. Nobody would want to play them. Like if they're a first 4 team, you want to see them with a healthy Zach Freemantle and Conwell and some of these other guards. Hell no, nobody does.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like Ryan Conwell goes for 22 yesterday. He fouled out. And Sean talked about that after the game, saying, Ryan, we need you to not foul out. He's gotten into foul trouble a couple of times this year. But Conwell had a really tough game against Marquette. Didn't play well. Gets that Christmas break, comes back, goes for 22. And that's where Xavier, because Xavier, I don't think has that one guy, as you were just talking about, Jeff, with some of these other teams. They don't have that guy that can just go get you a bucket at any point. Like, hey, clear out, score off the dribble, go get you a bucket. But this team has so many shooters. Dante Maddox has been playing better recently. And you know who else has been playing better in the last couple of games? Is Jerome Hunter. I mean, he missed all of last season. He has a heart issue. He has a torn Achilles. He misses an entire season, basically out of basketball for 16 months. And now he's come back in the last 2 or 3 games. He's starting to play better. That's where if you're Xavier, even without Freemantle, and then you mix Freemantle back into the fold, all right, now things are rolling a little bit. Mike, did you get a chance to watch this game? And if you did, your take on Xavier as they beat Seton Hall 94-72 yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it there, that they may not have a guy that can go get you one. I still think Conwell has a little bit of that in him, but I'm not sure it really matters with this Xavier team, because on the aggregate, with the optionality that they have in that backcourt, the skill they have in that backcourt, and the shooting they have in that backcourt, like McKnight was just okay yesterday, and it just kind of didn't matter because you got all these other guys like Conwell, like Maddox, like Foster, that, that's what stuck out to me in the UConn game was just, dude after dude stepping up, hitting big shots. It's why, even with Freemantle out, and the hope is obviously that he comes back. I mean, this is a tournament team to me. Like I don't really have any second thoughts about it. I mean, I know they got somewhat of a gauntlet there towards the end of January, but I still think they're the 3rd best team in the Big East because it's they're a couple possessions away from I think us looking at them a lot differently. Because right now, I mean, they're 9-5, 1-2, and that could very easily be 11-3, 3-0. And now what? Like now, how are we talking about Xavier? All because of a few possessions. So I think as the season goes on, they're going to figure out how to close out those games and really lay the hammer down and win them. But for now, like I don't want to play the game of like, hey, look at their record, because when you watch them, I mean, there are not many better backcourts collectively in the Big East. Like I just don't see it. I mean, I know UConn and Marquette, obviously they have talent in the backcourt, but beyond that, I love the pieces on the Xavier team, and they get like a healthy, good Fremantle back. Look out.
I always knew I loved you, Mike LaTulip. All right, let's go on and let's talk here about Creighton and St. John's. This is the last one here before we go to a break. Creighton and St. John's. St. John's just 2 of 9 from 3 yesterday in this game, and a real low-scoring, knockout, drag-out kind of game out there in Omaha. And Creighton gets the win. I think a really nice win for Creighton at home. Obviously, like you said, Jeff, that's a tough place to play. But Creighton needs wins like this. They need some momentum here. They need something like this, a 1-point win where you just grind it out. But a nice win for Creighton at home.
Listen, the biggest question mark everybody had about this St. John's team going into the year was perimeter shooting. And 2 for 9, those are Indiana Hoosiers' Mike Woodson numbers. Although even Woodson, at least they're shooting more. They're not making them. They're going 1 for 20 from 3. But you're not winning games going 2 for 9. I actually thought, they did what you need to do against Creighton, right? Like you gave Kalkbrenner his 15, and Ashworth got, the same basically, and you limited everybody else. The problem was you couldn't score. And they got off to a good start. Then Creighton took the lead. And, I don't know. I mean, this team, I had higher hopes for them, even with having the questions about the perimeter shooting. I just thought Kadari Richmond he's been a disappointment. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He's been a disappointment for a guy that has been through the wars over and over. He's an older dude. They paid him a lot of money. We know that. The expectations are you should be one of the best guards in the league, and he's looked nothing like that for most of the season so far.
Mike, your take on the Johnnies there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of bunch this all in together, but I'll start with Creighton. Actually, I think we're going to be doing this a lot with Creighton this year, where it's just like it's going to be somewhat of a Jekyll and Hyde, and part of it's because Creighton, the results for Creighton, and if they win or lose a game will be dependent on what the other team does. And I say that because St. John's came into this game, it just wasn't a very smart game for them at all. I mean, you take whatever it was, 23 mid-range jumpers. You don't get all the way downhill. I know Kalkbrenner is a deterrent for that. But Jeff, you and I were on a show earlier, and I'm talking about Creighton's ball screen coverage. It's a super, super deep drop. And what is that force? That force is tough twos if you want to take those tough twos. And St. John's was like, cool, we're just going to take these tough twos the whole game. And that's why you end up with shooting 34% from 2. No, forget the 2 for 9 from 3. This is a team that I just feel like with some of the skill, and Kadari Richmond, he was solid in the mid-range at Seton Hall. But like to not convert on those and to just kind of bail Creighton out. And the other thing that defense does, they obviously don't foul, so you don't get to the free throw line. But because they play such a deep drop, they don't get in rotation, so you don't have avenues to rebound. And so I know St. John's had, I think they ended up with 14 offensive rebounds yesterday, but against a team like Creighton, they could have had even more if they made it more of a point to get to that last layer of the defense and to really not just bail Creighton out. Because the reality is Creighton turned the ball over 19 times. I mean, it's not like Creighton played some great game yesterday. I mean, I think St. John's, we talked about earlier with Marquette and Providence, St. John's lost this game. Like this to me says more about St. John's than it says about Creighton. That's just my thoughts on it, because it was discouraging to see that.
And it would have been a huge road win. I mean, that's a big road win for St. John's, because again, they could be a bubble team at the end of the day. I don't think they will be. I feel still a little bit better than it sounds like you do, Mike, but partially because they get Rick Pitino as the coach. So I'm banking on the fact that he's going to figure it out. But again, it's hard to turn a team of a lot of non-shooters into shooters, especially when a lot of these guys have played a lot of basketball over the course of their careers. You're not all of a sudden going to become a great shooter in your 4 or 5 of your college career. It rarely happens that way.
Well, and the other thing too is like you have the shooting you mentioned, like they should be a really physical team, and we've seen that this year. They have imposed their will with their size, and the way that you don't do that is by doing what they did against Creighton yesterday and settling for pull-ups. That's not imposing your will at all. So we'll see what happens with them, and then I think with Creighton too. What do you do from now until February 22nd? That's 12 games. You play UConn and Marquette twice. Can you go 6-6, right? Because the last 5 games of the year, you got Creighton, or you got Georgetown, DePaul, and Butler all at home. You go on the road to Seton Hall. Like, can you go 6-6? Be 8-7 at that point, and then finish out the season with 3 or 4 wins and be at 11 or 12 wins in conference? Like, can Creighton do that without Pop Isaacs and with really? I mean, Ashworth's more like we talked about Chucky Hepburn, like more of kind of a combo off guard, and now he's thrusted into point guard duties. He had 10 turnovers yesterday. Like, can you survive Big East play really without a point guard? That's the question for Creighton.
Right. All right. Jeff Goodman has been wearing a West Virginia hat waiting to sing Country Roads for almost an hour. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk West Virginia and Kansas. We'll talk Bryce James and close out the show with some bold predictions and everything else. Stick with us on the Field of 68 after dark.
There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that. Would you be surprised to find out that the Field of 68 is home to more than 35 podcasts? More than 25 team-specific podcasts that are hosted by the people that know what fans want the most. The Goodman and Humble podcast, the DTF podcast, the A10 Insider podcast, and the Mountain West podcast. But wait, there's even more. The Field of 68 will be launching the ACC Insider podcast this year. Subscribe to this channel and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to the Field of 68 after dark. Paul Fritschner, Jeff Goodman, Mike LaTulip. It's great to be with you, fellas. And one game from yesterday that we haven't talked about yet. The reason Jeff is wearing that West Virginia hat he's got on right there. It is West Virginia who went on the road after travel troubles. They're shorthanded, everything else. They go to Allen Fieldhouse and they win 62-61. Kansas had won 33 straight conference openers. This was West Virginia's first ever win at Kansas. Remarkable for West Virginia, and they get it done. Jeff, Mountaineers, how about that on the road?
This might be the best win of the entire season for a team. I mean, think about this. Bill Self's record at Allen Fieldhouse coming to the game was 321-18, guys. West Virginia has 3 real dudes, right? I mean, they do. They have 3 real dudes. Tucker DeVries, Small, and Hansberry. And they were without DeVries and Hansberry for this game. DeVries, I don't even know if and when he's coming back. Hansberry should be back soon. Small was terrific, but, the guy who carried him early, I'd never even heard of this guy, Eduardo Andre. He started his career at Nebraska, barely played. Was in oblivion the last couple of years at Fresno State while they won like 5 games. And he has 15 points yesterday and carries him in the first half. And then Small kind of steps up when it matters most. But, listen, West Virginia, I thought was going to be bad again. I really did. I thought they'd like, okay, DeVries and Small and nothing else. And, they're going to be, like, I don't know, 14th place team in the league. They're going to get eaten up and chewed out. They've got wins now. Think about this. Darren DeVries has beaten Bill Self in Lawrence. He's beaten Mark Few and Tommy Lloyd, both on neutral courts. They're a locked tournament team right now. They should be ranked by everybody after this one. And Kansas, man, I know we'll get to it, but I don't even know what to make out of them right now. I'm finally at the point where I'm concerned about Kansas, because I ranked them preseason number 1. In Bill Self, I trust. And now I'm like, I don't know. So, but West Virginia, give them their props. Darren DeVries and those dudes, man, they deserve it, because I thought they were, and again, we didn't even mention the fact that they landed at 2 a.m. for a 1 o'clock game. They had plane issues. They had to call in another plane. The plane that came in blew out all of its tires when it landed. So they had to call in another plane from Miami. It got in, they land, they get to their hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I forget what they got, Whataburger, I think, at 2 a.m. in the morning for dinner. So I'm thinking, man, their stomachs are going to be in trouble. There's no way they're going to win this. They're going to lose by 40. And they end up jumping out to a 10-0 start and holding on for the victory. And, man, that was a big one for West Virginia.
Yeah,
Mike,
you talked about it.
Good.
Yeah, no, you talked about the circumstances, man. I mean, the with the flight, no Hansberry, no DeVries, and I thought just from the start of that game to come out and carry yourselves like you were the better team, and then back it up and play like it. That's what was so impressive about it. Like, this is not one of those situations where it's like, hey, Kansas wins that game 9 out of 10 times, and this was the one time for West Virginia. Like, this West Virginia's good. Like, they're good. And so I've been so impressed with Javon Small, and to see a guy like that who comes from Oklahoma State, 15 a game last year, and then just takes it to another level this year with honestly, I mean, I know DeVries is out, but like probably better players around him too. And he's still producing at a higher level. The conditioning for him, 36 minutes a game. He went all 40 against Kansas yesterday. You talked about Eduardo Andre. He only started one game before yesterday. And then gets to start and just, again, like they carried themselves. Like he didn't carry himself like a guy that started one game and was coming to Fog Allen. Like this just like it's a mentality with this West Virginia team. So I was impressed with that. And then we're seeing what we saw for years at Drake with DeVries as a coach. And I'll get into it when we talk about Kansas a little bit, just kind of how he just, kind of outcoached Bill Self in that game. And just what they were doing to Kansas defensively and how they were exploiting the way that Kansas plays defensively. Geez, I mean, they put them in a bind. And this is Jeff, you touched on it. Just given the circumstances, one of the most impressive wins of the season. I don't think by any means this was a fluke.
Jeff, what you rank Kansas number 1 in the preseason, and now here we are on New Year's Day, and you're saying that are you hitting the panic button? You're officially concerned. You're smashing the panic button. The panic button is out on the table, and you're all over that panic button. Why, Jeff? What concerns you most about Kansas, and is it fixable?
So I thought they addressed their issues from last year, which were shooting and a guy that they could put the ball in their hands and go make a play. And the only one who's stepped up is Zeke Mayo, because Rylan Griffin's really done nothing, and AJ Storr has been completely invisible. And they like him. The staff, that's the crazy part. They rave about AJ Storr as a team guy, but he barely played. He didn't do anything last game. And I think he's the X factor for them. I think Bill Self, in order to get to a point where you are a Final Four contender, you better be able to get something out of AJ Storr. And again, the pieces are never going to fit perfectly when you have KJ Adams, DeJuan Harris, and Hunter Dickinson all on the floor together. Let's face it. They're just not, right? Like, they're just not, because DeJuan Harris is not a shooter. KJ Adams is not a shooter. Hunter Dickinson, for a stretch there, he made a bunch of threes, but he's not a shooter. And then defensively, listen, Hunter puts you in a tough spot defensively. He just does. You can take advantage of him, and that's what West Virginia did here. The other point I want to make on West Virginia, that Mike started with, that they got the confidence. They came out to a lead early, but when Kansas came back and tied the game, like that said a ton to me about West Virginia, because normally when that happens, they come storming back. They were down, 18, then it was 14, still 8 with like 6 minutes left. And they came back and tied it. And I thought the game was done at that point. And again, Javon Small made some big boy plays down the stretch.
Yep. Mike, what's your overall concern level here for Kansas?
It's the second time this year they've been just kind of completely out physical by a team that's more active, more athletic. We saw it with Mizzou. They turned it over 22 times, 15 times in the first half. The turnovers weren't necessarily the issue against West Virginia, but I just thought they looked overwhelmed at times. And this is what I think the biggest difference is with this Kansas team compared to maybe Kansas teams of the past. Is like, you think about the team that won the title in 22, right? It's big physical wings. It's Jalen Wilson. It's Agbaji. It's Braun. You go even further. It's Wayne Selden. It's Svi. Like, they don't have that. And so like there's times where they just look small and they look thin. And that's just a really tough spot to be in. But the biggest thing for me is this is a collection of a lot of older guys, and the lack of communication defensively, and how West Virginia was dicing them up. And Jeff, you talked about it with Hunter and how he struggles at times defensively. I don't think he gets any help either, because they put him on the ball. They put 2 on the ball. They have him hard hedge. And then if you're going to hard hedge, man, your communication on the backside, your rotations better be on point, or you're going to get freaking exposed. And that's what happened in the West Virginia game, where all West Virginia did was Darren DeVries said, hey, we're going to set a high ball screen up top, and then we're going to have the guy who's down on the block just replace the guy that set the ball screen. We're just going to do a roll and replace. It's a simple action, but it completely flummoxed Kansas, because they're guys on the backside that have to communicate who the roller is, who's tagging on the roller. Like, I watched AJ Storr point at his guy going up to the top, telling DeJuan Harris, hey, go get my guy up top. And then he went and took the same guy. And then they're getting dunks under the basket. So like that's part of the issue. So when we look at AJ Storr, I don't question what he brings to the table offensively. But if you're not going to defend and you're not going to communicate, especially on this Kansas team that puts 2 on the ball defensively. So like that was what stuck out to me, was DeVries saw that early and said, we're going roll replace, we're slipping, we're going short roll. Like second half, they go short roll with Andre, and Hunter's lifted, the guy guarding the ball screen's lifted, and then you got KJ Adams alone in the paint. And I mean, KJ Adams, what, 6'5", 6'6"? Yeah. And it's not a very physically, he is physically imposing, but he's not a tall guy. And they're just 3-on-2 playing out that short roll and exposing them. But the last point that I'll mention is they got to figure out this front court rotation. I'm not talking about Dickinson. I'm talking about Badunga and Adams, because that game changed in the second half when Badunga was in there at the 4, because they were bigger, they were longer. He plays hard. Right. He rim runs, he rebounds. Like that's when they crawled back into that game. And I'm a big KJ Adams fan. Like I love the guys that, even though they can't, step out and shoot it, they bring other things to the table, and he does that. But I just wonder from a spacing standpoint, and it's like, if you're going to have a non-shooter out there at the 4, why not have the non-shooter be the guy that's longer and bigger and taller and can switch on to guards like Badunga does? I know Adams does too. But that's what stuck out to me late in that game when they crawled back into it. But yeah, it is concerning, because it's the second time this year we've seen them, kind of get out physical. And in the Big 12, like, you could have more nights like this with teams like Houston, teams like Iowa State.
All right, let's move on to our last big topic of the day. It is Bryce James, son of LeBron James, commits to Tommy Lloyd in Arizona. Jeff, you got the scoop on this one.
Well, listen, I was shocked. I'm an Arizona grad, number one. I've seen Bryce James play plenty over the last few years on the circuit. Probably saw him play, I don't know, half dozen times this past summer between April and July. In the Peach Jam, here were his stats, guys. And again, he's 6'6". He is LeBron's younger son, plays for Sierra Canyon. He averaged 5.6 points and 2.8 rebounds in 5 Peach Jam games earlier this summer in July. Was 3 for 17 from 3. He averaged 6.9 points overall in the entire circuit, EYBL circuit. He's just kind of nondescript. He just is. I mean, he's just kind of nondescript. But here's the real reason, in my opinion, talking to some people, why Arizona took his commitment, because he's not ready. He's not. Listen, we were hard on Bronny James. Bronny James was much further along than Bryce. Now, Bryce is 6'6", okay? So his upside might be a little bit higher in some respects, but he's a high-character kid. We know that. I won't be surprised if he redshirts next year at Arizona. But I think one of the key reasons here that he ended up at Arizona and Arizona takes him is because Rich Paul, who represents him, obviously Rich Paul is LeBron's buddy, and for Clutch, he also represents a couple other big-time players. Koa Pete, one of the top players in this class, and also another kid, Braden Burries, who's ranked right around top 10 in this class, uncommitted, looking at Arizona, looking at UCLA, looking at Oregon. So I think it was a combination of things for Arizona. It was like, all right, you know what? And the other part, guys, is from everything I've been told, there's not the same path here. It's not like LeBron is going to push for Bryce to be a one and done. In fact, he might be okay with the plan to redshirt and take this thing slow. And if you're Arizona, you're saying to yourself, all right, you know what? If that's the case and he's going to be okay with it, we'll throw him in. We'll either redshirt him. He'll be our 12th guy. We'll see what the upside is. And if we can use him to help us get one of these other two dudes, why not?
All right, let's close out this show. Toast of the night. We're going to do bold predictions here for 2025. You can do it for the end of the college basketball season this year. You can do it for the off season, whatever you want this to be. Mike, we'll start with yours. What is your bold prediction for 2025?
Yeah, jury might be out on how bold this is, but I think with all the SEC talk, my bold prediction is that Duke is going to be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. I think when you look at the SEC, like Duke probably won't run the table in the ACC, but I think they'll come close. And when you look at the SEC as well, it's, there's so many of these teams double up with each other. I mean, Bama and Auburn play twice. Florida and Tennessee play twice. Tennessee and Kentucky play twice. And that's just, Duke doesn't have to worry about that. So my bold prediction is that Duke is the number 1 overall seed. And I don't want to hear about the conference stuff either. Like, oh, they're going to err on the side of maybe an SEC team who has more losses being the number 1. Like we've seen that it just doesn't matter. Like I don't think the NCAA, I don't think the committee really takes that into account when you look at like Dayton was going to be a number 1 seed in 2020. Gonzaga's been a number 1 overall seed, coming out of the West Coast Conference. So that's my bold prediction, is that the Duke Blue Devils, because they're going to continue to get better with how young they are, they're going to be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament.
Jeff.
First, before I make a bold prediction, I just want to say something in memory of Mike Babel, a friend of mine who I've known for forever, who passed away Monday, 47 years old, of a heart attack. Mike and his twin brother John were stars at North Attleboro High in Massachusetts. He played for UMass in the late 90s, a terrific defender. He was part of Calipari's last recruiting class at UMass, played for Bruiser Flint, was an assistant, various stops at Wagner, at UTEP, at Auburn, at Drexel. He was engaged to be married. So my prayers go out to Mike, to John, to his whole family. Again, you're not going to find a better person. Mike Babel was as class as it gets, guys, and saw him last year and always with a huge smile and always positive, and said how happy he was. He was in his second year this year at their academy as a head coach over there. So Mike Babel, you will be missed by plenty, including myself. As for bold takes, predictions, I'll say this. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'll throw myself out there on this one. I will say that somebody before the NCAA tournament will bail from their team and bail from playing in the NCAA tournament because they will demand more money. They will want more NIL, and there will be an impasse. And somebody will say, I'm checking out. I'm checking out because I want more money. I deserve it. I got us to the NCAA tournament. I outplayed my contract, and there's going to be an issue there. I see it happen. I just see this is where the industry is going right now. I don't know who it'll be, what team, but don't be surprised, guys.
So not necessarily that they haven't gotten their money yet, that you think they'll get more, they'll want more money.
Yeah. I think it'll be something like that. It'll be some sort of issue with money, with NIL and money. And they'll say, the hell with it. I'm not playing until I get my money.
I think what makes that bold, what makes that a bold prediction is all the NIL stuff that's happened, that's gone south publicly, has been with bad teams. So if you're like mostly, so if you're saying this is a potential like NCAA tournament team player that is potentially opting out of the season, that qualifies.
And we've seen it with bowl games, right? Like bowl games, it's different because they don't really mean anything.
Yeah.
With the NCAA tournament, everybody has a chance to win the whole thing, and I do.
Yeah, nobody opts out. Nobody opts out of the NCAA tournament. Yeah.
No, of course not. How could you? Well, in this day and age, I think somebody could and will.
All right, I'll keep mine. Mine with LaTulip was kind of along the same lines, so we're kind of batting up here in the same order. I was going to say 3 SEC teams get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and I think Florida sneaks in there. I don't know if that's possible, but I really like Florida this year. My problem with Florida is that they don't really have that convincing top tier win that I'm looking for. But they have the metrics right now, and if they can start to stack some of those wins, metric-wise, they are positioned to kind of make a run at that. And can they join in Auburn? Can they join Tennessee? They're on that top line. 3 is very aggressive, but if we're getting bold,
Alabama maybe.
Why not?
Alabama could get it going.
Alabama, yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. All right,
it's going to come down to the Big East. Like Marquette and UConn are going to win a lot of games. Duke's going to win a lot of games, so that's going to eat into a lot of that. I think the 1 and 2 seed, but yeah, I mean, if there's any year that the SEC is going to do it, it feels like it's going to be this year.
All right, fellas, great show tonight. Appreciate you guys having me here to host this show. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Hopefully see you all again soon.
Bigfoot, right?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. Jeff Goodman, Mike LaTulip, I'm Paul Fritschner signing off. This is the Field at 68 After Dark presented by BetMGM.